Hi everyone, it's Tanya and welcome to today's video. So today's video is going to be about Fyodor Dostoevsky's favorite books. So books that Fyodor Dostoevsky read and enjoyed. In my previous video in this series where I talked about Leo Tolstoy's favorite books, a lot of people in the comments asked to make a similar video about Dostoevsky, and so here we are doing it, and I hope you enjoy. So let's start. We will start with Russian literature, and then we will go on to foreign literature and his favorite foreign authors and books. Let's start with Russian books. So in his family, when he was a kid, they had this tradition of reading books in the evening with his parents and siblings, and that's how Dostoevsky got interested in literature. That's how he discovered his passion for this art. And since his childhood, one of his favorite Russian authors was Alexander Pushkin. Alexander Pushkin, he primarily is a poet, so he wrote a lot of poems and novels in verse. He also did translations. He wrote a lot of things. He wrote fairy tales, he wrote novels, he wrote short stories, but primarily he was a poet. So Dostoevsky, he knew a lot of Pushkin's poems by heart. He could recite them easily. One of his favorite works by Pushkin was none other than the Queen of Spades, and I have already talked about Queen of Spades in my autumnal book video recommendations, so if you haven't seen that, if you're interested, please go watch. It's not a novel, it's a very short story about this family legend that there is this magic combination of cards. If you know it, you will win any card game for sure, and it's about a young man trying to become rich and trying to discover this combination of cards. I will go more in depth about this book in that video, so if you're interested, please watch. But yes, it was one of Dostoevsky's favorite works by Alexander Pushkin, and in fact he loved Pushkin so much that after Pushkin's death, and if you didn't know, Pushkin died after a duel. I think duel is also an English word, right? So that's like when two people shoot each other. So that's how Pushkin died. And after that, Dostoevsky decided to wear all black to show his support to the family and to show also his grief and his loss. Pushkin meant a lot to him. Another Russian author who influenced Dostoevsky a lot and whom our young writer loved very much was Gogol. And in fact, you can see a lot of themes that you can see in Gogol's works. You can also notice them in early Dostoevsky's works, like for example his early novel Poor Folks, which is sometimes translated into English as Poor People. I guess like word-to-word translation would be poor people. Deals with small people, unimportant people. That's the topic that also Gogol discusses a lot in his works. And after one of our famous other poets read this new novel by Dostoevsky, the poet's name was Nikolai Nekrasov, so after Nekrasov read this novel, he called Dostoevsky Russian New Gogol. So you can see that it was heavily influenced by Nikolai Gogol. Some other works from Russian literature that Dostoevsky read and enjoyed was Oblomov by Ivan Goncharov. And again, I talked about this book already in my video about Russian literature, so if you're interested you can watch. But basically it's a novel about this very lazy very lazy person. I haven't read this book in a long time, so I need to reread it myself. I don't remember it very well. I just remember that I was constantly angry with that main character because he was just so lazy. He was constantly laying, he didn't want to do anything, but he had a very deep inner world. Like he was a very good person, he was a very nice person, but he was just very inactive, passive. And it's a novel about that, and I guess it just showed the character of gentry at that time. And so Dostoevsky read that novel, he loved it a lot, and he recommended it to many of his friends. Another novel that he also loved and recommended to his friends and family was none other than The War and Peace by Tolstoy. If he needed some encouragement to read The War and Peace, here it is. Dostoevsky. Loved it. War and Peace was another one of his favorite Russian novels. So there you have it, favorite Russian novels that Dostoevsky loved, some of them that I could find. Unfortunately, I couldn't find like a whole list of, I couldn't find any information of his full library. I found a list of kind of books that his wife, after his death, compiled of like all the books that she found in his library. But there were so many religious books, so many religious books about saint people and what have you. A lot of religious literature, just let you know. He read a lot of religious literature as well. I decided not to include it here because I don't know if it's translated into English. I don't know. But there was like a whole lot of religious books. So just thought I would let you know. For example, again, if you didn't know, Dostoevsky was sent to katorga. Katorga, I don't know if it's an English word, it's definitely Russian probably. So katorga, it's like a working camp for like, it's a punishment, and people that are punished by intense, like political prisoners or any other prisoners, they would be sent to Siberia, or they would be sent to Far East. That's where all the working camps usually were, because the weather conditions are very hard, and there weren't many people who wanted to live there. Pretty much everybody wanted to live in like European part of Russia, and everything that is further than the Ural Mountains, like Siberia, wasn't really anybody's dream. So there weren't many people, and in order to develop that area and in order to build towns and cities there, they would send, there were some volunteers of course who because land was cheap, so there were some people who wanted to go there, but there were very, very few, and that's why majority of people were convicts, like political convicts and some other prisoners. And so Dostoevsky was one of those for 5 years, since 1849 till 1854. He was convicted for participating in a kind of political group. They were just like free-spirited young people. They were discussing abolishing slavery. Again, in Russia we didn't call it slavery, I guess, like we call it крепостное право, and the English word that I found on Wikipedia is serfdom. So that's the English word for that, I guess. So we didn't have like foreign slaves here, like we didn't have black people, for example, as slaves. They were Russian people, they were like normal peasants, but peasants would belong to gentry people, like gentry class families. They were like their property. And actually one of the indicators of how wealthy or how rich a certain family is, like gentry family, was the number of souls that they had. Like souls meaning peasants that belonged to them. And so the political kind of club where Dostoevsky belonged, one of those kind of discussing the opportunities of abolishing this serfdom and discussing how to do it. They were not actually planning any political uprising. Some of them were, but like the majority of them were kind of just talking about it and discussing. But eventually they were discovered by the government, and they were condemned first they were condemned to capital punishment, so they were supposed to be killed, all of them. And they were very young, like the average age was 20 something, so the youngest member was 19 and the oldest member was like 39 probably, so it was like maybe 30, like the average age. So they were all students, majority of them were students, they were very young. What actually happened, the emperor Nikolai I, he forgave them and he replaced capital punishment with intense labor works in katorga, in working camps. But in order to teach these young people a lesson, they still organized like the whole event, army wanting and going to assassinate them. So they brought them to this like square in the city, and they were wearing sacks on their heads, and they were like put in the line, and soldiers were standing with rifles in front of them. And then in the very last moment there was like a sound, indicating that they were forgiven and that their punishment was cancelled and replaced. But obviously, like, being so close to death really messed up a lot of people's mind, including Dostoevsky, because he remembered that moment, that time of being almost killed to the end of his days. One of the people who was there with him, he went mad. A lot of people were also like mentally damaged. Well, that's what happened, and that's eventually how Dostoevsky went to katorga and how he came there. And in katorga they were not allowed to have any books except for gospel or the Bible. So basically, when he was there, the only book that he had was gospel. And the time there, the time in katorga was a very hard time for him, not only because of works, but also because he wasn't accepted by other prisoners there, because he was a gentry, he was from a high class, and majority of the convicts there were like small people and poor people. So he was like an outcast. They were bullying him a lot. He mentioned in one of his diaries later that only his faith in God helped him to live through this time and to survive. So he was reading gospel throughout those 5 years, and you can also see like a lot of like religious influence, I guess, in his works. Like, for example, Raskolnikov at the end of Crime and Punishment, he also reads gospel when he is in working camps. Or, for example, the figure of Jesus Christ was like the main figure that influenced the character of Knyaz Myshkin. You can also see religious, obviously, influences in Brothers Karamazov. So religion and religious writing have also affected Dostoevsky's life and Dostoevsky's literary works a lot. And now off to foreign literature and works by foreign writers. And spoiler alert, there's going to be a lot of French writers and a lot of French books, because at that time in Russia, at least, I don't know about other parts of the world, but at least in Russia, French was pretty much like English today. Like, if you're educated, if you go to school, if you're from high society, you probably speak French. I read somewhere that some people spoke French better than they spoke Russian, because they were reading a lot of French novels, they were speaking French to each other. Yeah, French was important, and it's no surprise that Dostoevsky was reading a lot of French novels. He started his literary career actually by translating works of French authors, such as Georges Sand. Georges Sand was one of his favorite writers. Georges Sand, Victor Hugo, but he also read some English novels. For example, I found he really enjoyed Anne Radcliffe. She is like a Gothic writer of Gothic literature. So yeah, he liked these types of stories. Also, he read Dickens, but I couldn't find which particular books by Dickens he was reading. But yeah, so he was reading Dickens. He read also Goffman from German literature, Hoffmann, and Schiller. But French apparently were his favorite. One of his most favorite books that he often came back to and that he often reread was Don Quixote. Well, not French, it's Spanish, right? So Don Quixote. He really liked that novel, and I read that he reread it regularly. I haven't read it. I'm sure you know better than me probably what it's about, so we will not discuss it. So Don Quixote. Georges Sand was one of his favorite writers, and he read her, I'm not sure, the Uskok. I will put the name of the book here. So the Uskok or the Corsair. So it's like two different translations. The Uskok or the Corsair by Georges Sand. He read it and he also translated it, but it wasn't published, so he couldn't publish it. Another work that he appreciated a lot was Candide or Candide. I'm not sure how I'm very sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it. So in Russian it's Candide. So one more book was Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, and one more book by Victor Hugo was The Last Day of a Condemned Man. And I guess you can see why he was interested in that, given his personal life and his personal experiences. Maybe it was relatable to him. So the Last Day of a Condemned Man. When young, he very much loved Honoré de Balzac. Balzac's novel Eugenie Grandet was the first book that he translated into Russian from French. Some other authors that he loved very much were Eugene Sue and Frederic Sully. And as for what he enjoyed in his books, from what I found, he loved these dramatic collisions and bright and well-developed, interesting and well-developed characters. And for example, he spoke about George Sand, he spoke about George Sand, and he mentioned that he was impressed by her strict and reserved writing and high and pure ideals in her works. So that's what he said about George Sand. So yes, there you have it, guys. Dostoevsky's favorite authors and favorite books that influenced his career and influenced him as a writer and as a person. I hope you enjoyed. I hope it was interesting. And yeah, I will think what next authors I should do. I am definitely enjoying this series. I'm curious myself, and I definitely want to read. Now I want to read George Sand, and I want to read Victor Hugo even more. Well, I wanted to read Victor Hugo even before, but still. So yes, I hope you're enjoying these videos. I hope you're finding some interesting book recommendations. Let me know in the comments what next author you would want to see in this series. And thank you very much for watching. I hope you're staying safe. I hope you're having a very good day. And I will see you soon in my next videos. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.